So thank you very much for including our favorite business. I'm going to talk about previous six. So this is a joint work with Uday, Rajan from Michigan. Yeah, so then. Sorry about that again. Okay, so let's start with the motivation of these projects. We know that there's estimation that around 56 million consumers in the US, they do not have the credit history data. And another 19 million, they only have outdated or short credit history. So this fact will prevent these consumers from, say, people from accessing the credit lending markets. And so now some lenders, they are looking for new solution. And one hot topic now is about the alternative data. So what is alternative data? There is no formal definition of alternative data. It's a relative concept. So traditionally in the credit lending markets, people use your tax reports, your assets, your income, all this information to assess the credit worthiness. So that's traditional data. And all the other data that are now used in the credit lending process are considered as alternative data. So one example, as the previous paper mentions, now you use social media and you have likes, dislikes on the social media, you post your vacation. So all these kinds of data help predict, help depict your digital profiles. Okay, so that's you on the social media. And this kind of information has been collected by the lenders and put into their credit lending models. Okay, so that is one type of alternative data. The other type is as we go to the fintech lenders, and they may assess the credit worthiness based on the phone brand you are using, whether you use iPhones or Android, with the assumption or with some like research showing that people who use iPhones are more credit worthy. Okay, so what we look at in this paper is that different from the traditional data, the alternative data are arguably easier to be manipulated. So that is the starting point of our projects. So think about the traditional data. You submit the test reports to the vendor, and if you fraud it, if there's some flaws, then there's a huge cost for you if you get reports. You may just go to jail. But if with this alternative data, you can purposely pretend to be a wealthy person. You go to some luxury hotel to spend your vacation and show some very fancy pictures, and just pretend that okay, I'm a wealthy person, and it's okay if you lend me this money. Okay. So if the borrowers, they understand that now this is fintech lenders, and they are using the alternative data in the credit lending process, then that's may affect the borrower's behavior. Okay? And further that can affect the data collection by the lenders. So in this paper, we asked the following research questions. First, how should a lender invest in such big data technology to screen the borrowers? And in this context, we looked at that the borrowers can manipulate their data, their digital profiles, in this way. Second research question is that how does the borrower's manipulation cost will affect the data collection and the borrower's manipulation decisions? And finally, what will be the implications for the regulations from the use of alternative data in the credit lending markets? So here's a preview of the results. What we find is that when the lender uses more data, for that data coverage in the model in the credit lending process, then that's may incentivize the borrowers to manipulate their digital profiles more likely. So if that's the case, then even if this big data technology is free, the lender may find it's not optimal to use all the possible data in their credit lending process. Therefore, there is a endogenous limits of big data in the credit lending markets. So that's the main idea we want to deliver in this time. And so if you look at the lender's data coverage and it depends on the lender's profits, there can be a non-monotonic events. Okay? I will show you later. And first we talk about the implications on the data regulation. So some notable findings are the following. So usually we think like from the lender's perspective, if the regulator limits the use of big data in the credit lending process, that may hurt the lender. What we find is that on the opposite, the limits on the use of alternative data can actually help the lender to improve the problems. And from the borrower's perspective, the limit to the use of alternative data might benefit them from the privacy perspective. But if we shut down that channel, then we find in our context, allowing the lender to use more alternative data may actually work to the benefits of the borrowers. So that's a review of the results. Now let me show you the model setup. It's a 5-year paper. Let's see the simple model setup. I will use 3 slides to show you the model. So it's a very simplified economy. We have one lender and a bunch of borrowers. So the borrowers are looking for a unit funding for a project. And this project has a binary outcome. Exactly is uncertain. So with some probability Q, the projects can generate a cash flow R. And with the remaining probability, the project just fails using nothing. Okay? So that's a binary outcome projects. Now, there is some information asymmetry, basic information asymmetry between the lender and the borrowers. So the borrowers, there can be 2 types of borrowers, either high type or low type. Okay? So they differ in terms of their project's success probability. And here's some information. So for the high type, the exacting of fraction alpha of the borrowers are high type. And the high type, they have positive NPV projects, which is first funding. And the low type, they only have negative NPV projects. So remember, this project has a binary outcome. Expected profit from this project will just be Q, the probability of project success, times the R, which is cash flow once it is used. Okay. And if this expected benefit exceeds the initial cost 1, then this means it is a positive NPV projects. And similarly, the low type may only have negative NPV projects. Without knowing who is high type is low type, exactly that the projects is likely to be worse funded. So that is this project. Okay? But this is assumption. Now let's go to the innovation part of this document. So how do we model manipulation? Okay? So here is the borrower's thing. On the line type, the borrower is indicated as a theta. But the borrowers can have some digital profiles, which is indicated by T. Okay? So without doing anything, your digital profile will perfectly review your underlying type, whether you are rich or not. But that digital profiles can be manipulated. Okay? And here's how we model it. The manipulation intensity is captured by the variable M. So M is modeled in the following way. If you exert some effort to manipulate your digital profile, then with that probability N, your digital profile can be disconnected from your underlying type. Okay? And that is probabilistic because with the remaining probability, you can just fail your digital profile will still review your true type. So that is how we model manipulation. And manipulation is positive. If I am, let's say, iPhone user, now I want to switch to iPhone so that I can find a loan on the platform. Then I need to pay some costs. Okay? So that is one interpretation of this cost. Another interpretation is that if you get cost, what will be your reputation cost, you just go to jail or you can nothing to punish you. So that is the manipulation. Next, about the data technology by the lender. So the lender has a data technology. Okay? The data technology in this model is summarized by a signal S. So S can review something about the digital profile T. And how do we model the advancements of this data technology? So with probability rho, the signal S will perfectly review the digital profile. So, and with the remaining probability, the signal just remains uninformative. And this signal structure is not crucial in this paper. We adopt it just for the projectability. So the key variable here is just the rho. So how do we interpret the rho? There are two ways to interpret it. So one way is to interpret it as the data coverage. So you can collect a lot of information about these flowers. The phone in the use, so it's online behavior. So all this data, if you collect as much as possible, then altogether can help have a more complete picture about this block. That's one interpretation. The second interpretation is that given the same set of information, how can I develop the algorithm so that I can generate more accurate signal about this? Okay. So that's two interpretations of this rho. And to show our results in the most transparent way, we shut down the costs, meaning that for the vendor, if it increases data technology rho, there's no cost. Okay? The key idea in this, like the key result is just leadership, even if to increase the rho, incurs no cost. In whatever, the vendor will not choose rho to be one. So if rho equals to 1, then that is the most advanced data technology, but the vendor will not do that. That's what we will show in this slide. So finally, to conclude the model setup, the vendor can observe the signal, and then the vendor will do some manual updating about the type of this flora, and then decides whether or not I want to lend to this person as was interest rates. And then finally, we have a technical assumption. So remember here we have one vendor and the several borrowers. So this monopolist vendor can extract all the rest. To prevent that from happening, we give some outside option to the borrower. So yes, the borrower and the vendor can play the game that is playing the piece. So this table will summarize the each side of the conditional whether the project succeeds or not. If the project succeeds, then the lender's net deal will just be the interest rates received from this loan. And if it fails, then the lender will use the initial funding cost $1. For the borrower, if it accepts the loan offer from the lender, then what she will get is just the total pie generated from these projects and taking out the proportion that belongs to lender. So the rest will go to the pockets of the borrower. And if the project fails, then it just goes away, protected by the limits of liability. And if it does not accept the loan, then it can go to the outside option, which can be integrated as a no offer from the other person. Okay, so you would just receive this, and the B can be interpreted as the interest rates offered by the other. So those are the specifics of the model. Now let's see the timeline. So this summarizes how this game develops. Initially, the lender will choose the data coverage, which is summarized by the variable rho. In this slide, I use red color to indicate the choice variables made by the lender, and the blue color indicates the choice variables chosen by the borrower. Okay, so they will be endogenous determinants in whatever. So after the lender choose the data coverage, then it's borrower's turn to play. So the borrower will observe their underlying time, and then they will decide their manipulation decisions. Okay, and the borrower then learn about their outside option. The lender receive the signal and decides what will be the loan offer I will offer to the borrower. And finally, the borrower receives the loan offer and decide what will not be accepted. So this is how this game will develop in this economy, and if you bear that in mind, when we go to the equilibrium customization, I will start from the very last and then move back. In the end, we will show equilibrium that the row will be strictly smaller than 1. Even if it is costly to choose a more advanced data knowledge, the measure will not do so. So there is an endogenous limits of use of big data in the credit lending markets. So let's see the details. So let's start from a benchmark. We shut down the manipulation. So you can think of this benchmark as the traditional state data. You submit your assets, test reports, and you cannot do anything. You cannot manipulate it. Okay, so this setup can be interpreted as a setting where the manipulation cost is definitely high. So no one will ever think about manipulating their own data. And so what we show in this setup is that if that's the case, then equilibrium, the lender will just choose the most advanced data technology, which is characterized by the optimal row to be 1. It is quite simple. If the lender, if the borrower cannot manipulate, then the signal, okay, this is a signal received by the lender, which will review information about the digital profile. If there's no manipulation, then the digital profile will just be perfectly aligned with the fundamental. So why not the lender just choose the most accurate signal? There's no cost, only benefits. So I go to the extreme. So that's the benchmark. Now we will move on to the main model to say if the borrowers can manipulate what will happen. This row will be strictly less than 1. So here are some details about some equilibrium customization. So remember that the timeline I showed you, we start from the very last step to characterize equilibrium. The first thing we need to solve is that even if there's no offer, how will the borrowers decide whether or not to accept it? So from the borrower's perspective, if they accept this offer, then if the project succeeds, they will receive this R total pi taken out of the parts that belongs to the lender. And with the probability Q, they will receive this outcome. And if they don't accept this outside this offer, but they go to the outside, then if they how much they will get. So B is essentially the alternative interest rates from the outside loan offer. So intuitively, they will accept the loan if only if the expected profits is higher from here, which is characterized by this equation inequality. It makes sense the interest rate offered by the lender is lower than that's the borrower and get only us very intuitive. And this inequality is important because it tells us what will be the demand function for the lender. Okay, so remember B is a random variable. So from this inequality, we can calculate how likely the borrower will accept this loan offer. And this is important for the lender because then we know what will be the demand function. Next, we move back to think about the optimal interest rates offered by the lender and the manipulation. Okay? Now I will show you is that those two decisions are jointly determined. So why is that? First, think about the lender's optimal loan offer. So from the lender's perspective, after it observed the signal, then they will update the belief about the type of the borrower. And then this interest rate R will be chosen to maximize the expected payoff. But wait a second, this signal will be affected by the borrower's manipulation decision. So to characterize the optimal loan rates, we need to pin down the manipulation first. How about the manipulation? So the manipulation decision is simply, so we have a high type, low type, with the high type mimics and low type, with the low type mimics and high type. And this kind of decision will also be affected by the low interest rates set by the lender. Therefore, as you can see here, the two problems are essentially closely connected and we need to solve them at the same time. So we focus on the equilibrium, which is a very natural equilibrium in which only the low type will manipulate. So only the low type will manipulate the high type in the hope of getting a more favorable interest rates. The more favorable here means lower interest rates, right? So this is a very intuitive equilibrium, and we can demonstrate this is the unique equilibrium based on some requirements. And after fixing this, then we get to the measures problem. Now, the signal can take three possibilities. After observing the high signal, the measure understands this high signal, measure can be the true high type, or just no type that we need to be in high type. So that's the updating process in the mind of the measure. But if it observes a low type signal, then it understands this must be a low type guy because the high type will not bother to make a low type. And if it's no signal, then there's no measure of physics. So this equation just shows how we determine the optimal interest rate. I will skip that and basically just to show you when the signal indicates it's high type or there's no signal, the optimal interest rate will take the following form. It is the interest rate that makes the measure break even plus some premium. And this premium compensates the measure for the information asymmetry. And if it is a low type signal, then the type of the volume will be purposely reduced. And understanding this is not worth funding projects, the measure will not want to match this guide anyway. Okay. So that is the optimal low interest. And sorry about this equation, but this characterizes the borrower's optimal manipulation. So the idea is quite simple. Now the borrower wants to decide how much to manipulate their digital profile. So he will think, okay, if I mimic, then with some probability, I can be identified as a high time. In that case, I will receive a more favorable interest rates RH. With some probability, I won't be identified as high time, but I will still be identified as a low time. And with some other probability, the signal of the measure just applies, so there is no signal generated. Okay. So that's the calculation happens in the minds of the borrower. I won't bother you with that. Let's look at the picture. So this picture shows you how the low type spot manipulation will be affected by the lender's data technology row. Remember, the higher the row, the more or the less the lender's data technology is. Okay? So when the lender adopts more advanced data technology, okay, then the low type will be more likely to manipulate their digital profile. So this is an increasing function. In the extreme case, all these low type will mimic their digital profile. So this manipulation intensity becomes 1. As I will show later, this is the key mechanism to drive our results. Okay, the endogenous limit of big data in credit lending market is driven by this. So the right panel plots how the optimal interest rates will be affected by the lender's data technology. So there are 3 types of interest rates, depending on the 3 types of signals received by the lender. The lender can receive no signal, okay? So this dash line, these 2 dash line indicate these 2 cases. So it means that its data technology by the lender will not affect the optimal interest rate here. 1 equals I don't want to manage this guy anyway, or there's no information generated. So it will not has my optimal interest. What we can max is the optimal interest rates when the lender receives the high signal. With a higher row, the lender understands that the load time will be more likely to manipulate their data. Therefore, this signal will become less and less informative. Okay? So in the end, they can only charge this type of person a higher and higher interest rates. So the limit of the load time to high time will just hurts the high time will just raise interest rate received by them. So let's do the intermediate step. Finally, we move back to the first stage. We need to characterize what is the optimal data coverage in this economy. So the lender, when choosing this data coverage, they will understand the subsequent manipulation decision and the subsequent like optimal interest rates. So they will decide what will be the road that's how we to maximize the profits. Okay? So the profit is characterized as big I. This is the key results of this item. The left-most panel, I just repeats the panel I just showed you. When the lender adopts more of the non-data technology, the load time will have stronger incentives to manipulate their digital profile. Now, the middle panel will plot the key results. How will this row affect the lender's profits? So as you can see here, the profits exhibits a hump shape pattern here. So once you see the hump shape, there are some countervailing forces. What are they here? When the lender adopts more advanced data technology, on the one hand, they will have a better ability to screen the borrowers. Okay, so they will be better able to see their digital profiles. That's one positive force that's worth to the benefits of the lender's profits. But the downside comes from the manipulation, because the higher row will incentivize the load time to limit more, so that can impair the data quality of this lender. So that can eventually drive down the profits of the lender. So in the end, the lender's profits will exhibit a hump shape pattern here. And in whatever, if the lender wants to maximize profits, it will choose a interior row. Okay, the row will be straightly smaller than 1. In this numerical example, it will be around 0.4. Okay. So that's why that's the key message of this IVA. Even if it's free to choose a high row, whatever, there is an endogenous limit of big data in this private lending markets, and the channel comes from the potential manipulation of the borrowers. And finally, we also look at the borrower surplus. It also does exhibit a hump shape pattern. Again, several countervailing forces here. So a higher row means better screening ability for the lender. So the high time will be happy because now I can be more likely to separate from the low time guys. That's a good thing for the borrowers. However, for the low time, a higher row means that they will manipulate more actively, so they will incur the manipulation cost. And manipulation cost here is a aggravated cost, so that will drive down the borrower surplus. So again, when aggregates both types of borrower surplus, we have a hump shape pattern. So how many minutes I have? 5 minutes. We also did some extensions, and the one extension I want to mention here is that we relaxed the assumption. Like in the beginning, we assumed that the data coverage, the row is observable. And now we relax it. We say, okay, what if row becomes unobservable? The borrowers, they have no idea how much data is affected to this credit lending model. and that will happen. What we show here is that when this row becomes unobservable, then in equilibrium, the measure will just choose row equals to 1. And this result is quite intuitive. If row is not equal to 1, and if the borrowers believe that, then the measure always has incentives to keep it an increased row, but without changing the action of this clause. So equilibrium, it must be 1. So, and then we compare the two cases. We find that from the case where the data coverage is unobservable to the case when it is observable, the measure can be better off because now the higher transparency helps the measure to permit it to say, hey, this is how much data I've gotten from it, and you don't bother to manipulate something. I hate your manipulation because that hurts my data quality. So now this kind of transparency will benefit the measure, and it can also benefit the borrower. Those are better off. And this kind of transparency is actually discussed by the regulator. So people are thinking, okay, we need to make it more transparent to better the consumers know what kind of data are being used and how they are automatically enter these credit decisions. Okay, so that's we map into our model is the economy from the case when the data is unobservable to the case when it is observable. Finally, let me talk about Strub implication in this model. So again, some heavy regulation debates on the use of the alternative data in the credit underwriting process. So what they show is that okay, using this alternative data may not be riskier than the traditional data. And if you restrict its use, it may hurt the people there, okay? And our results that is also for today's arguments. So what we do here is that again, these 3 panels you have seen it. So this regulation can be mapped into this figure by saying that now the regulator limits the use of the alternative data by saying that the row cannot be higher than say 0.6. Okay. So previously there's no regulation, then people may just use the row because the row maximum will be just 1. But now, if the regulation is imposed, then unlimited will just be 0.7 something. So what we show here is that a tighter limitation can actually help the vendor because now they can commit to say, okay, we only have the limited use of the data of the consumers. Don't worry about it, don't manipulate it, or don't bother manipulating it. Okay, so in that case, the lender is flexible and the borrowers is also flexible. Okay, I think it's time to then conclude. We started the credit lending markets, and the key feature of the model is that this borrower can manipulate their data. And what we show is that in this kind of economy, there can be an endogenous limit of the use of big data. And that is driven by the manipulation by the borrowers. Thank you very much. For discussing the more
thank the organizers for inviting me to this conference and giving me the opportunity to discuss the paper. It's always going to be in. And when I first received the email and saw the title of this paper, I thought that yeah, it must be quite cool. We have this conference here on Fintech, AI, and big data and business. And here he is and submit the paper called The Limit of Big Data. Right, and the paper actually questions folklore that maybe many of us believe in, that is more data is better. The paper shows no, not in any situation. So let me put this paper into some context. Well, first, lending is one of the earliest and or even most successful applications of financial technology. And so depending on the restrictions and how you define fintech lending, there was an annual growth of like 10 to 20% of this industry per year over the last decade. And the overall market size is now about 150 billion US dollars globally. And if you want to define fintech lending, I would argue there's often two features that come into play. One is fintech lending is often trying to be peer-to-peer and cut out an intermediary. That is not what this paper is about. But the second feature is there's an increasing use of data, right? An increasing large variety of data that's used to screen and rate borrowers. And I also want to give you just an anecdote here. In one project I'm working on with Xiong and Barry here at City University and also around the college at Warwick, we look at investment on online lending platforms. And in the data set we're working with, each loan comes with 83 loan borrower characteristics. And so there's really a large number, there's a large variety of data on these fintech lending platforms. And here this paper provides a theoretical model, a theoretical contribution that studies how much data should a fintech lender acquire to price loans. And it studies this in this presence of possible data manipulation. And I think this is very interesting. It's new to the best of my knowledge. And the paper provides an interesting or questions it shows that more data is not always better. But more than that, it also gives a very intuitive mechanism that shows why more data is not always better. And this mechanism, in a nutshell, I think works as follows. So if as a lender, I get more and more data, then I get better and better at differentiating between low and high type borrowers. But if I'm able to do that, then as a low type borrower, I have a higher and higher incentive to manipulate my data. Okay, and this in turn basically makes every borrower appear as a high type borrower. And then the data I collect becomes less useful. And so I think it's a very nice intuition and a very nice intuition. Okay, so we ended a great job in introducing this model. I'm not sure how much value I can add to this, but I just tried to summarize this model here on one slide. Right. And so there's a single lender, a continuum of borrowers, the borrowers following two types. There's a high type borrower, a low type borrower. Each borrower is having a project which requires an initial investment of one and giving a potential return or payoff of capital with some probability. And the probability depends on the type of the borrower. If the project is not successful, then the payoff is just zero. So there's these two possible outcomes. The fraction of high type borrowers is alpha. Then the lender can choose a probability row with which it observes a signal that is the digital profile of the borrower. Okay. And this probability has two possible interpretations. One is the data technology, or simply the amount of data that you're collecting. On the other hand, the borrower can manipulate this digital profile, right? And this manipulation comes at a cost. And so with some probability M that is in control of the borrower, the digital profile can be the opposite type of what the borrower actually is. So the borrower is low type can be high type and vice versa. So this happens at the first stage. And the second stage, the lender observes the signal, and offers an interest rate to the borrower. And the borrower accepts the interest rate if the interest rate is lower than an outside option. Okay. And then eventually everything is resolved, and when the product is successful, the lender receives 1 plus the interest rate, and the borrower the payoff times what the lender is receiving. Otherwise, everyone gets zero. All agents are risk neutral and just maximize this expected payoff. So let me summarize the results without any math. So some of the key points that I found interesting. Well, first, if the borrower cannot manipulate their digital profile, then the lender will collect as much data as possible. Right? We're always becoming one. I think this is very intuitive. Right? If you kind of manipulate, if the lender says Roy equal 1, then the lender always knows exactly really 1, the type of the borrower can perfectly discriminate between the two. Okay, the second point is that when the low type borrower's manipulation intensity increases, then interest rate charged per borrower with high type profile is also increasing, but the other two are constant. Again, I think this is quite intuitive. If you have a meaningless signal, okay, then the lender can do nothing. It doesn't learn anything about you. So the manipulation rate doesn't influence this rate. If the signal is low type, well, then the lender knows that you're low type, no matter the manipulation rate. So, well, the manipulation intensity also doesn't determine its interest rate. On the other hand, if the signal is high type and you have a high manipulation rate, right, then from this high type signal, you can't learn so much. And maybe it's actually a high type, maybe it's a low type that pretends to be a high type, and you don't know, right? So basically, with increasing manipulation intensity, the risk of default of a high type signal is increasing, and you need to charge a higher interest rate to justify that risk. The third point is, I think, the main mechanism behind this model. If you have higher data coverage by the lender, then the low type borrowers have a higher incentive to manipulate their model. Again, I think the intuition is, I think, easier to understood if you look at the extremes. And if the lender would not collect any data, well, then there's no incentive to manipulate the digital profile. Okay, then M is equal to 0. On the other hand, if the lender collects all possible data, gets a signal with probability 1, if you would not manipulate it, then the lender always knows your type. Okay, then you never get any of it. Okay, so then, then there is a strong incentive to start manipulating your profile. Again, and this point leads to the main, I think, the main result that despite this role being free to the lender, we will have here an equilibrium that the lender may optimally select less than full data coverage. The reason is exactly the last one. Again, the final result that was in one of the extensions that's very interesting. It shows that when the data technology is not observable, the role is not observable to the borrowers, well, then the lender would always say 1. Well, that's optimal because M cannot depend on both. Again, we know from this point this might be less than optimal. Okay, so it actually might be in the interest of the lender to choose a data, to be transparent about the data technology that it is using. So let me come to some comments. My main comment is on an implicit assumption as in the model. Right, so here, the cost the borrower pays to manipulate their profile does not depend on the amount of data that the lender is collecting. In other words, to turn around the data technology that the lender employs, it just determines the probability of reading or becoming a signal, but it doesn't determine the accuracy of that signal. And I think this is an important assumption. And my intuition is that the assumption is not just technical, it's important for the qualitative predictions of the model. So my suggestion here would be one of two options. Either just be more transparent about it and explain how it drives the results, and also discuss some situations where the assumption is possible. Or one can maybe possibly generalize the model and instead of working with the cost of the borrower, just depending on the manipulation rate, also depending on the amount of data that the lender is collecting and being increasing, of course, in both components. Now here, going along this road, I think my complicated story a bit, depending on what how this depends exactly looks like. Might be that you recall the result or how something goes. 1 minute. Okay, then I have some other comments I just mentioned briefly. I think there's an interesting parallel paper by Xiong, relatively recent, which is studying a similar situation in online markets. I think that serves a comparison. I was wondering in the example with this specific choice of a uniform outside option and providing costs, maybe it's possible to get some explicit results, and instead of just characterization of first order equations. And as a final comment, that's just I would maybe suggest to work with a single borrower instead of a continuum, and that avoids that you have a lender that needs to lend out an infinite amount at either the continuum of borrowers. You could just have one borrower with probability alpha. It's high time, really one less alpha as well. Okay, so let me conclude. I think it's a very interesting paper. It has an interesting implication. Right? More data is not always better. It provides a mechanism that explains it. And my main comment is really the first one on this assumption that the possibility of inflation is independent of the amount of data collected. Thank you.
Thank you, Moris, for this very yeah, for the first one, yes, we are thinking about to modify the cost function. And it's very intuitive and as you suggested, if the more data is included in the model, then it's more costly for the consumers to figure out how to gain this. So we definitely will try that. And the second comment is about the APR privacy. We kind of try to connect our paper to the privacy literature. And one thing I'm thinking is that the cost C will be a inverse measure of the privacy concerns. Say, if you are really caring about your privacy, then the cost will be low for you because you will exert a lot of efforts to manipulate it. And that wasn't an interesting idea, like manipulation is also one form of privacy. So we're trying to explore that idea. And the third one is about the change in the potential to order. Yes, we definitely can do that. We can buy us the presentation. So thank you very much.
Okay, let's take questions from the floor. So due to communication, we take all questions first, and then we can give okay.
Yeah, well, I will make it quick. I don't want to dominate discussion, but in case of Jan, even you myself, I think it's very crucial how you capture these data files for models more data. Some of the results are interesting to find more data is not better for small even understand when the data the data problems are third. My information is totally all the way. That's not why is it because what I think of data more data is all of that and how you capture the data problem. My basic information is hard, but there's also data in fact pick up. We don't even know what the language is looking at, right? They're like 80 variables. And when you are collecting really more variables, it's actually harder. And maybe this is what our have is the cost, right? It's harder to do to kind of follow every variable. And the bank of the lender can easily just randomize, right? So yeah, we like 80 variable, but I only use randomized 20 variable. And then it's very difficult for people to make it. Then you don't know, right? So then now when the move, right, what you are being value on is not very clear. You should get higher so the language and higher problem. I think it's different between what I saw you know, what I expect and what you are, I think it will depend on how you know who are they are, the data coverage and work with. And increasingly, more mentioned our part, our manipulation doesn't depend on the number of variables, the size of data. But the overall, really want to say that really means.
Let me move the second question.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very interesting paper. And because I'm from a data science background, so I want to kind of big data a little bit. So I think manipulation itself is a signal of these evolvers. So is it possible that through big data, through historical performance and historical characteristics, can algorithms learn whether you this manipulation and if they can capture that, I think big data can still play a really good role in making this lending decision. Thank you.
Seems like the shape of the end function, the perpetuity, I was wondering, maybe that there's some key will be driving the point because, in traditional maybe would be the kind of performance of that would cause sometimes separating humans, so just on that.
All right, so thank you for all these questions. So the first two questions, I actually want to invent the big data. I'm not here to challenge the big data. What we show here is to point out the low potential channel as my set the limits of the big data. So yeah, for the first two questions, I think yes, more intuition, more data will always be better. I think we can incorporate that as a possibility by also incorporating Moris versus comments, so by achieving the manipulation costs to be a function of the data coverage. So higher data coverage will make it more cost to manipulate. Then we can sort of incorporate the possibility. If that, as you mentioned, more data is included, then it's hard to gain. And second data manipulation itself is a signal of the underlying type of the dollars and revenue data can detect such manipulation possibility. Yes, I think definitely there's such a possibility. I'm just thinking onto the model units model. Yeah, that's probably supposed to be this question, how we model the data and how we model the formulation here. But we definitely will check the losses. So in these points, the assumption of the manipulation cost, right? Yeah, here we actually have a let's say 70 whatever, because the high time signal will be a rule of a true high time and true low time, because the low time signal will be purely low time. So I think that kind of result is intuitive and immutable. Of course, it relies on some whatever requirements, but I believe that it shouldn't be independent of the precision of function. And so this is a robust against the underlying constitutes function. Thank you for this.
Yes, one.
Yeah.
So without beyond manipulation, we those types would depend to be affected. How thinking about like thinking again, so maybe I beat in my aspect, but I know you're collecting lots of data, and I try to confuse you by generating other user data so that you know what I mean? Like if you only like one thing, check on one thing,
Yeah.
I will appear to be beat. But if you, I know you are looking at 10 variables, then I generally use that signal. So that even if I'm beat in one dimension, overall, I'm not so bad. So that's another reason for why the landing is not weak.
That could be a condition.
But it's probably a different problem.
Yeah, but it's so.
But generally, I agree with we should all say that. If it's not incentive to the member, not use. All the conflict.
It's really a wonderful discussion. Okay, we can continue discussion maybe during the dinner. Okay, so let's move our knowledge creation journey. Let's move to the next speaker. Next